One of the most requested videos on this channel for a voice review is this man here, Shashi Tharoor.
I belong to the Henry VIII School of Public Speaking.
I know that I've got a big following from India and people who are looking to improve their voice and improve their English. And there's a lot of people, when they kind of want to learn English, they really like to go for this RP accent. And actually, Shashi Tharoor isn't really RP. He's like posh. But let's have a listen to him first.
And rather magnificent institution. I was going to assure you that I belong to the Henry VIII School of Public Speaking. That, as Henry VIII said to his wives, I shall not keep you long. But now finding myself the seventh speaker out of 8 in what must already seem a rather long evening to you, I rather feel like Henry VIII's last wife. I more or less know what's expected of me, but I'm not sure how to do it any differently. Perhaps what I should do is really try and pay attention to the arguments that were advanced by the opposition today. We had, for example, Sir Richard Ottaway suggesting, challenging the very idea.
I don't want to offend anyone by saying this, but my first opinion of Shashi Tharoor, and again, I've not done any research on the guy. I know that he's Indian, but judging by his voice, he's spoken a lot with English people. And he's not only spoken a lot with English people, I would say that he's mixed with people of the upper classes or rich people, because he's not speaking RP. He's speaking almost like the Queen's English, and the Queen has a very strong accent for those who didn't realise. And he's kind of got this thing that people with wealth and money often like to share around their kind of communities. And we've covered some parts of that accent before, namely Jacob Rees-Mogg. Yeah, so my first thing is that his English is one of those English accents that actually separates him from English people. And not through where he's from, but by class, and usually by money. So if that's not his upbringing and his natural accent, he's chosen to speak like this. And everyone who speaks has, at some point in their life, chosen to adopt certain traits and habits in the way they speak, and he's chosen this. And he's clearly a very good speaker. Rhetorically, he's very funny, he's engaging, he's charismatic, and that goes a long way in, I think, politics.
I rather feel like Henry VIII's last wife. I more or less know what's expected of me, but I'm not sure how to do it any differently.
He does sound very British, but he's the kind of British that he sounds like the kind of British that most British people don't trust, because most British people are working class and middle class. And so to have a voice that's very posh does put some people off. It really does. In fact, one thing I learned from the voiceover world was that when you're doing kind of commercials, often they don't use voices that sound wealthy or are from this kind of accent, because it makes others not trust them, because it always sounds like that person's not one of them. So they always like accents and colloquial voices that speak from specific areas around the country. And this is one of those ones that's a little bit considered elite.
Perhaps what I should do is really try and pay attention to the arguments that were advanced.
Try and pay attention to the arguments that advanced.
Try and pay attention to the arguments that were advanced.
It's quite breathy in the respect that doesn't sound like he's taken enough air, but I think he's kind of on script. He's not script, but he's got cards and he's trying to keep the flow going, trying to keep the momentum. And so he's topping up his air, and he's letting us hear that, which is interesting. I think it's his way. Some people say, and he's just going to collect his thoughts, to keep people on the same channel as him, so they know that he's going to speak again and they can continue listening. So that he's using his breath in order to keep people listening.
Try and pay attention to the arguments that were advanced by the opposition today.
That was an interesting.
By the opposition today.
Today, hello. My name is Shashi Tharoor. Now, he's also affecting his voice to try and sound a bit deeper than he naturally is. I tend to do this if I'm singing a bit out of my range or speaking, trying to sound like a bigger boss type person. So he's got this really kind of well-to-do British posh accent, and he's trying to beef up the sound of it, and he's almost trying to do a Brian Blessed.
I'm Brian Blessed!
They're challenging the very idea.
challenging the very idea that he's enjoying his intelligence. Like, he's clearly a very smart man, and he doesn't mind showing it, I think. Again, I don't know anything about this guy other than he's a politician, that he's of Indian heritage, and so these comments and the things that I'm saying are literally what I'm picking up from his voice and the judgments I'm making on what I can hear. And so what happens with this accent is that there's a bit of mumbling involved. There's a bit of fumbling and which also happens with, you know, like we heard with Prince Charles when I reviewed his voice.
He worsened by the experience of British colonialism.
By the experience of British colonialism.
By the experience of British colonialism. Well, I stand to offer you the Indian example, Sir Richard.
Well, I stand to offer you the Indian example, Sir Richard.
Sir Richard. India...
Sir Richard. And the reason that I know that he's kind of affecting his voice in a lower manner is because the breath is kind of giving it away. He's got a bit of a texture, and I'm not sure if that's with him all the time. This is just from the, you know, this specific video that I'm watching. But there's an airiness to it, and he's pushing through that.
Why?
Why?
Simply because India had been governed for the benefit of Britain.
For the benefit of Britain. And if he hadn't been pushing through it, it wouldn't be so... So he's trying to push his voice down, but he's limiting the space that's letting air through. So he's pushing too much air through a small channel and trying to push it down. So he's bringing his larynx down. He's doing this, trying to affect his voice, and it's actually quite damaging.
Britain's rise for 200 years was financed by its depredations in India.
Depredations in India.
Depredations in India.
So, right, here's the thing. My highlight of Shashi Tharoor's voice is that he's mastered this kind of a regal, posh, upper-class accent, but it doesn't necessarily make me trust him. However, what's good about him is his brain. And the way he's able to keep speaking and keep people engaged with what he's speaking, whether it's because he's using breath, and even though I'd say that he's topping up badly by doing that every few seconds, I think it's his intentions and his expression. He's very funny. His timing is impeccable. And I think if he hadn't learned necessarily this accent, he'd have more air, he'd have a better placement, he'd have an easier way of explaining what he needs to say. However, this is the accent that he's learned and he's chosen to use, and judging by the way he's using it, it's kind of having a bit of a detrimental impact on his voice. Yeah, so highlights is that he's expressive and he's able to allow what's in his mind to come out, and he's not self-conscious. However, I think because of the accent, it's somehow hindered the ability to use his voice as well as he could. And he's tightening up there and still pushing down low. So he's actually putting a lot of effort and force onto his vocal folds and around, you know, areas around his voice box. And I don't think that's necessarily a good thing. I think this video was done some years ago. I haven't heard him recently, but this was the video that was recommended to me, so this is what I'm listening to. One thing I'd say also is that don't top up air with your nose. It's noisy and it's only drying out your airwaves. So you can take a pause, take your time to breathe in quietly. I mean, I do it from time to time, especially on video, because I've got so many ideas in my head. And I guess it's the same with him. It's the same with everyone. But again, I wouldn't say that's a good trait about me or him. For those of my subscribers in India, I'd say his accent actually does make people feel distanced from him. So when they hear people speak in such a posh way, they feel that there's a divide. And so be careful if you're learning English or you want to be dealing more with English people, because not a lot of people speak like that, and the ones that do are very wealthy and therefore are often very wealthy and from a class that, there's a bit of a divide in the UK, as there is also, I know, in India. Not maybe quite as big, but it does associate with what's known as the upper class or elite. So just be careful if you want to learn a British accent. Maybe something that's easier to understand and easier and more recognizable and will open the doors to more areas for you, would be more RP, as opposed to this kind of plumbing mouth, really posh kind of speaking. Blah, blah, blah. It just sounds a little bit overblown in today's language. Of course, it's up to you. It's not for me to dictate, how you should be speaking. There's my review of Shashi Tharoor. I know it's not necessarily a big positive one, and he's got, it's an amazing sound that he's making, but again, I think a lot of the people that are watching this are interested in his voice because they might want to sound like that, and I'm just wondering why. And I just wanted to kind of explain to you how his voice does come across to someone who's native, who grew up in England. Okay, so thanks for watching this. I hope it's been useful. My name is Darren McStay. This is vocabilities.com, aka Improve Your Voice. And until the next time, look after your voice.
I have so many tales to tell, and up till now I've been telling them real badly, so I hate myself and all my faults, because the one thing time won't heal, the loss of days gone.